Hello and welcome back to the Move Abroad Coach podcast, everyone, and happy Easter. So, if I sound a little rough on this episode, it is because I am getting over solid 2 weeks of being super sick, some of which I couldn't even talk. So that was fun. Glad to be feeling a little bit better today so I could get this episode out to all of you. So today I want to talk a little bit about our 2 month long scouting trip. We've been getting a lot of questions about this. We've been getting questions on social media. I noticed in the last boot camp that I ran, lots of the questions in our Q&A were about scouting trips. And then also in Freedom Life Experience, me and our coaches have been getting questions as well. This is a hot topic. A lot of people are curious about it. And so we've talked about our epic 2 month long scouting trip quite a bit on this podcast, but I realized that we've talked about it across a lot of different episodes. And so the information is just really spread out. And so we've done everything from episodes around how to practically plan one, all the way through to our drunken wine fueled recaps of each country that we visited, comparing the countries to different, or comparing the cities to different love interests. We've done it all. But I figured let's put the information all in one place and give you a recap of our full scouting trip experience from start to finish, what we liked, what we wish we would have done differently, and how we really did that whole process. Now, our more kind of practical episode around like, here is how you plan one. I will link to that in the show notes because I do think that that's very beneficial if you want to actually start planning your scouting trip. But this episode is more going to walk you through our thought process into the planning, into the experience, and how Chris and I did it and managed to pull this trip off, but also what we were thinking and feeling during the trip as well. Because I realized there isn't actually a good episode on that. Like, we talk about it country by country, but I want to give you this kind of overarching recap of that experience in hindsight, where I talk about how it feels to be, in your first few destinations and not have found the right fit yet, all the way through like how we really made that decision. And then, what we did right, what we did wrong, what I wish would have done differently. So let's jump in all the way back to the very beginning. So we actually did this scouting trip a year ago now. That's crazy that it's been a year. I just realized during Easter, I was like, oh my gosh, last year during Easter, we were actually in Italy on our scouting trip. Fun fact. So it has been a whole year. This is crazy. So let's rewind to even further than a year ago. So where were we at? So Chris and I were living in Tbilisi, Georgia, where we'd actually been living for 5 years by the time that we left. And I've been living abroad for 13 years. Chris has been living abroad for even longer than that. And fun fact, we never planned on staying in Georgia for as long as we were there. Okay, so we planned on being there for 4 months. And ended up staying for 5 years. And what happened was we actually moved in January 2020. And then COVID happened, and we just decided to stay a little bit longer, see how things went. And then by the time restrictions lifted, we were looking around in our visa options. We were enjoying living in Georgia. Life was affordable. I was trying to build Move Abroad Coach actually from scratch. And we just decided, you know what, let's just stay longer. Then we were planning on moving to Mexico. I found out I was pregnant. We were like, well, let's stay in Georgia. I don't really want to be moving countries while pregnant. So we ended up being in Georgia for 5 years. Fun fact. But then by the time we were looking at going on this scouting trip, our thought process was, we're now making decent money with the business. And so we can qualify for any digital nomad visa that we want, pretty much. And so that is an incredible feeling when you finally get to the point in your business where you realize, or your finances, where you realize, well, I'm qualified for any of these. That's a really cool feeling. And, just going back a couple of years ago, I was at the point where I couldn't qualify for most of these. And so to get to the point in your business where you're like, wow, okay, with what I'm paying myself and the money coming into the business, the world is our oyster. We can pretty much pick and choose any of these digital nomad visa countries. Then we thought, well, we're already in Europe, kind of. Georgia's like on the border between Europe and Asia, but we thought, well, we're already in Europe. Let's just take advantage of it and go see all of the countries that we might be interested in moving to. And so, whether or not you do a scouting trip is really up to you. But for us at the time, it made sense. And here's why. Chris and I had already done our first Not Forever for a very long time, like 12 years for me at this point. And so I was thinking now that I have, a baby, a toddler now, the country that I move to next, I want to settle down in for a long time, if not become an immigrant, right? So my thought process is we've already done the first Not Forever. I want to be intentional. I've done the moving to a country without having ever been there before. I've done oh well, the visa's easy. Let's just stay here type of thing for a very long time now. So I want to be intentional about where we move next, especially because we were moving the plan was move with two cats and a toddler. And we were actually going to also be shipping our stuff, which is expensive. And so our thought process is we want to build a home here. And so let's be intentional about what we choose, especially because these digital nomad visas are not super easy to apply for. They're kind of complicated if we're going to move all our stuff and our kid, our pets. Let's be intentional about what we choose. So, do you need to do a scouting trip? Absolutely not. But I do think it's a great idea if you are wanting to settle someplace long term. You have the money, you have the time and the space to go do one. I do think that they're great. Where I think you don't need one is if you're doing a first not forever situation, you just want to get yourself overseas to get started, or you want to be a bit of a digital nomad at first, or a country tester, which I talk about in the bootcamp and Move Abroad Master Plan, casual plug. But this is someone who is hopping around to different countries every few weeks or months to eventually find your forever home that you settle down in. So this type of person doesn't need to do a scouting trip. I did not do scouting trips ever before I moved here. I did one to Mexico and then we didn't end up moving into Mexico. But before that, I had never done a scouting trip. I just moved there. But I was not shipping my stuff overseas. I didn't have, a toddler or pets. I was definitely a first not forever kind of situation with every move that I was doing. So for me, it wasn't that important. But this time we thought, okay, let's actually do one to feel good about the country that we're moving to, that we're settling down in. If we're going to spend like thousands of dollars to ship our stuff overseas, let's be pretty sure about the country or the city even that we're moving to. So we decided we're going to plan this scouting trip for the spring. And so the way that we narrowed down our destinations, because the world is our oyster now with digital nomad visas. So how do we narrow it down? Well, the first thing that we did was I actually made a list of what was most important to me with this move. And Chris made his own list. If you're moving with a partner, I suggest everybody make their own list. Also, if you have teenage kids, have them make a list of everything that's most important to you about the move. And you can even rank it. You can even have the most important stuff near the top and nice to haves towards the bottom. But what I did was I made a list of things like, well, firstly, I need to have a visa that allows me to run my business. Okay. I'm not getting a job on the ground. I'm not sneaking around when it comes to work. Like, I want a visa that allows me to run my business. That was my number one. But then the rest of the things on my list were things like Mediterranean vibes, or like a great environment for my daughter, like very family friendly. I had, when I did a future self visualization, I saw myself like in kind of more like a European Mediterranean atmosphere, and I wanted to be able to go to the sea, right? And then I had it all the way down to things like I want to live in a place that has really good food, but also has access to international cuisines. Bonus if I can find good Asian food there, even like hot pot or malatang, which everyone knows I'm obsessed with. And so I was listing out these things, and I wasn't just saying affordable, because what does affordable mean? I was saying things like I would like to be able to get a 3-bedroom apartment for X amount per month or less. So I was being pretty specific with what I wanted, and I got a really good idea of what was important to me. And then I noticed that there were certain things on Chris's list that weren't on my list, and vice versa. And so we tried to find this happy middle ground. And so I knew that we weren't necessarily going to find a place that had every single thing on our list, but I figured this is a really good starting place to get super clear on where we might want to move. What kind of location would be a really good fit for us? And we had things on there where it's, good international flights and easy to travel around Europe, like, access to an airport, livable without a car. Like, we had this whole list, right? And so with this list, Chris and I are pretty clear on what we want. And I actually like doing this first before we actually work on picking out individual countries, because the countries that come up might actually be different than what you originally thought, right? If you get clear on what you want before you actually pick a country, then you can kind of pick your countries based on the lifestyle that you actually want, if that makes sense. And so, because what was number one for me was, hey, we need to go to a place with the right visa. Well, the easiest way to narrow that down was through visas, right? And so this is what I like doing with people next, and that's what I do in Freedom Life Experience as well. Is like, okay, now that we're clear on what we want, what's the next step? We need the visa. And so I started looking at countries that checked the boxes of pretty much everything that we wanted. And I really hope you can't hear this construction because there's some banging going on above my head, but hopefully my good microphone will filter it out. So now that you're really clear on what you want, I started looking at the visas. What countries have digital nomad visas? Am I qualified? And how much of a hassle are these visas going to be to apply for? And so I started looking and I said, well, some countries that check a lot of the boxes that have the visas that we want are Italy, Spain, Greece, Albania, and Portugal were my top ones. So I said, okay, these are the ones where I can get the visa. We're all good. Digital nomad visa or an entrepreneurial style visa. I can run my business. We're good to go with these. And so what I actually did was I booked a call with our current visa expert that we partner with in Freedom Life Experience. His name is Tim. And so what we do with our Freedom Life Experience clients is everybody actually gets a private consultation with Tim. I booked one for myself, and I already know a lot about visas, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the expert. I'm going to talk to Tim, and I booked my own consultation for me. And so I hopped on a call with Tim, and I was talking through some of my questions and concerns and things like that. Here is the style of my business. I was a little bit concerned that my business wouldn't work for Spain because Spain had previously been very picky about B2B versus B2C businesses. They wanted to see that you had customers they wanted to see that the people paying you money were other businesses rather than customers. But the problem is that my business is a B2C business. I have like regular people customers, not necessarily other businesses that I partner with. And so I was a little bit worried that my business wouldn't qualify. Apparently, that's not a thing anymore. My business has obviously qualified. I do have the digital nomad visa for Spain now, spoiler alert. But I did want to talk with Tim about that because I didn't want to get my heart set on a country that I couldn't actually get a visa for. So I was refusing to let myself dream about Spain or get attached to Spain until I knew whether or not I could actually qualify for a visa there, because the Spanish digital nomad visa and the Italian digital nomad visa are quite new and the rules had been changing. So once I did get the green light for Spain, I said, okay, awesome. We can add Spain to the scouting trip. Now, I had other questions. For example, Portugal. We just recently had Kaylee from Expats Everywhere and Slate and Key here to talk about Portugal. Portuguese visa is a little bit complicated. And after talking with Tim, I was like, how does this work, right? If my partner is Australian and you have to apply from your home country, does he have to go to Australia for 4 months while I go to the US for 4 months and we apply separately? And he's like, no, 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 you guys would just go to the US because you're the main applicant. I'm like, okay, cool. But my husband can't be in the US for more than 3 months at a time. So I was trying to go through that math and I'm like, okay, I guess we could go to Mexico or we could like go to Portugal and fly back for the visa. But it was just getting very complicated. And we were still going to include Portugal in our scouting trip. And at a certain point, we were looking at how complicated this visa was and looking at our life in term like our life realistically, right? And so I was just we kind of looked at each other and we were like, are we that into Portugal that we want to deal with this visa? And we both looked at each other and we were like, not really. I mean, if we went on a scouting trip, we might have fallen in love with Portugal and decided that this visa was worth it. But at this point, we were like, God, because we couldn't even apply from within Georgia because we weren't actually residents of Georgia. Now, after talking with Kaylee, I now realize maybe we might have been able to say that we're tax residents, even though we're on a tourist visa. But even that is messy. And then we can't, I think Georgia doesn't have an embassy for Portugal. So we would have had to do it from Turkey. And I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, I don't want to deal with this. And so neither of us were that in love with the idea of Portugal that we wanted to deal with this visa. So we just scratched it off the list. We're like, you know what, whatever. We don't need to move there. And it's nothing against Portugal. It was more just for us and our situation. We were like, do we even want to add this to the scouting trip, looking at how complicated this visa is compared to all the other countries that we're interested in? And neither of us were that attached to the idea of it. So we just cut it. And you can just do that, right? Like maybe someday we take a trip to Portugal and I go, oh my God, it's wonderful. We should move there. Okay, whatever. We can just apply from within Spain and move to Portugal. It's fine. And getting our stuff to Portugal won't be as big of a deal as well. So, we thought, for right now, for our situation, we don't want to deal with this. So we scratched it off the list. And that's a perfectly valid reason to scratch something off the list. Now, the next thing that we did was we started some destination research. We started looking at what, like watching YouTube videos and joining expat Facebook groups and looking into what life is really like in some of these destinations. And so, in order to get a good idea of what cities to potentially look at, because I wanted to kind of start, once you pick the country, then you got to start looking at actual cities, right? And so we actually played with, at the time, ChatGPT. And now looking back, I think we were a little too reliant on ChatGPT. It was just, looking back, I'm like, they did have some good suggestions, but this was over a year ago that we were doing this. And I'm like, yeah, but now that I'm a little bit more familiar with ChatGPT, I'm like, yeah, but like do some research outside of ChatGPT. I mostly use Claude now, but still, I I do think use it to help you get some ideas, but then do research outside of it, right? And so what we used at the time was ChatGPT, and I basically fed all of the information of what we were looking for into ChatGPT. And then I had ChatGPT ask us questions. I think I played with it a bit more than Chris did, but I had to ask me questions. I said, to help me narrow down what cities are going to be right for me, ask me some questions. And this was really good food for thought. And this is where I think AI is quite good, where it can ask you questions to get you really clear on certain things. It would feed me scenarios, or it would say, how important is it to you to have other international friends? Do you want mostly local friends? Do you want a big international like expat community, or do you want a mix of both? How important is it for you to be able to integrate into the local community? Do you need international schools? Or are you going to send your daughter to local school? And it was having me think about things that I hadn't really fully thought through. Even the schooling aspect, like my daughter was so young at that point, like she was like a year and a half old. I'm like, I hadn't even fully thought this through, right? And so when I was saying things like, I want good schools for my daughter, then ChatGPT was coming back to me and saying, yeah, but what does that mean, good schools? do you want an international school or do you want like very high quality public local schools? And so then it got Chris and I talking and making decisions about things that we hadn't even fully thought through because our daughter was a year old. And so I do really like using AI as a tool for that kind of thing. And then verify what it gives you, because where I see, especially now that AI has gotten more and more popular and more commonly used, I do see things happening where people come to me and they're like, "Oh, well, ChatGPT said this," and I'm like, "Oh, ChatGPT is wrong." For example, even in this exercise, ChatGPT was trying to convince us that Slovenia had a digital nomad visa. It doesn't. And then I said, the best way to get AI to actually fess up to being wrong is you say, cite your sources. And like, I like, is this real? Please cite your sources. And so we got a link from them where it said, yes, I found it in this link. That link, that article that it linked to had no mention of Slovenia whatsoever. It was talking about a completely different country. And I'm like, okay, this is where you don't get your visa advice from AI. So yeah, we used it to give us some ideas of some cities that we might like on our scouting trip and kind of go back and forth. And then what we did was I actually took those cities, and my favorite resource for this was actually YouTube. So I took those cities and I plugged them into YouTube and I watched two kinds of videos. I watched travel videos, like travel vlogger videos, because I actually thought those were the best at showing you what the actual city looks like, more so actually than the expat YouTubers. So the travel vloggers, they would actually really kind of show you what the local food was like and some of the touristy sites and really show you around the city where it's like, okay, here's what it's like to go to Hania in 3 days. And they would kind of show you things that so that you could get a feel for what the city actually looks like. But then I liked the expat vloggers because they talked about their life there. They would say things like, I moved from the UK 1 year ago, and here's my life. And here, they'd break down their budget. They'd show you their apartment. They'd talk about the pros and cons of living there. And, the budgeting was very, very helpful. But also just them talking about their experience or showing you things in their everyday life. Sometimes they would say, come walk with me, I'll give you a neighborhood tour. And they'd really talk about what it was like to live there. And so we could see, does that match up with what we actually want in a location? And this was super helpful for helping us narrow things down and actually allowed us to cut a certain country, and that is Albania. Now, I have nothing against Albania. It's actually a very popular spot that a lot of my clients use for First Not Forever because it's very, very easy visa-wise, especially for your first year if you're from the US. But then also it's very affordable. But our thing with Albania is it just was too similar to Georgia. So when we were watching a video of them showing off Tirana, I turned to Chris and I was like, if somebody told me this was Tbilisi, I would say, yes, of course it is. And he said, I know, it looks exactly like where we live right now. I'm like, yeah, I know. And so then we were like, okay, well, we can't live in Tirana because it just felt like we were leaving 5 years in Georgia to move to another country that looked exactly like Georgia. It was just a little bit closer to the rest of Europe. Like that's how it felt. And from what we heard from some friends who had also lived there, the infrastructure was similar to Georgia, except maybe a little bit worse. And I'm like, okay, what are we like? If we're gonna move, it should be our future self visualization. We shouldn't just be moving to another country that's similar in price, looks exactly the same, but just has slightly better like beaches and vacation spots and is a little closer to Europe. Like we just wanted a more of a change than what Albania had to offer for us. But for you, it might be perfect, right? So this is why it's very individualized. But just from watching those YouTube videos, we were like, we don't want to move to a country that's the exact same as where we are right now because we're looking for a change. And so this is something that we might not have known unless we watched those YouTube videos. We also talked to people as well, and these were people that we trusted, right? These weren't people who had never been to the destinations we were looking at moving to. Like when we told our friends where we were looking at on their scouting trips, a lot of them had actually been to or spent significant time in some of these destinations. So they were giving us feedback, especially on places in Italy and stuff like that, where I mentioned Naples, and everyone I mentioned it to was like, oh, I don't know about that for you guys. And so it was very interesting to have those conversations. And of course, I want to make those decisions on my own, but it did help getting some feedback because then I could ask questions like, okay, why don't you like that for us? And then, I could watch YouTube videos and join expat Facebook groups and see what people were talking about and then make my own decisions that way. Now, one thing that I would try to do when you are looking for expat YouTube videos is look for people who are similar to you. I also suggest this for budgeting as well, like creating a destination budget and things like that. It's because you want to find people who can talk about their life and you can relate to them, especially in terms of a budget. A 23-year-old girl living in a studio apartment is probably not going to have the same budget as my family of three, where I need a home office. You know what I mean? It's a very different situation. And so I like looking for people who are similar to you, but I will say that actually a lot of the videos that I found that were very helpful and very informational were actually from retirees. And I'm in my mid-30s now, but I found I actually quite loved the retiree expat YouTube videos because they were just happy to share. Like there was no promotion, they weren't trying to make any money, they just wanted to share about their life. So not all of it was relevant to me in my age range, but I do think that like I just loved them. Like they were very great. So honestly, there's a good market for that. And I will say as well, looking at the YouTube videos that are available, I do think any of you who like vlogging, who like YouTube, like there is a big market for this. I do think more so than Instagram, like because Instagram can be quite saturated with that kind of content. With YouTube, I did in certain destinations struggle to find anything. And I was saying to Evan from our team has a YouTube channel. I can link to that in the show notes. I can give him a little shout out. But he's doing YouTube content on life here in Malaga. And I was saying to him, I was like, God, I wish your YouTube existed when I was planning this scouting trip and when I was moving because there really wasn't much. And it made me less excited about Malaga. I still kept it on my list because ChatGPT was convinced it was like in my top three. And so, but I really like the one video that I saw, I was like, it kind of gave me a sense that Malaga was more of a destination for retirees and like British tourists. And like, it is very popular with the British tourists, yes, but that's not actually how Malaga feels when you're here. Actually, Alicante seemed to be much more popular with the retirees than Malaga. And so that was just the sense that I got from like the one retired couple that I could watch. And so this is something where, hey, there's a big market for this. People want these videos. So start making them. And you can go support Evan on his YouTube. I'll link to it in the show notes. Where was I going with this? Got on a little tangent, but I did watch YouTube videos to help me narrow it down, and eventually we came up with a list of destinations in 3 different countries: Greece, Italy, and Spain. Now, do I recommend that you do a scouting trip to 3 countries? Not really. We're kind of crazy. I would recommend that you narrow it down a bit further than Chris and I did. We wanted to do a bit more of an exploration because, as I said, we're crazy. And also, I kind of wanted to scout these destinations so that I could recommend them to clients. And I was able to do this and work at the same time for 2 months. That was also kind of intense. But we wanted to do more of an epic scouting trip because we're crazy. I do recommend narrowing it down to 1, max 2 countries and maybe not 8 destinations. If you want to do a multi country scouting trip, something like that, I might recommend becoming a country tester rather than doing like an epic 2 to 3 month scouting trip. Okay. So, as I mentioned before, a country tester is somebody who is a bit of a digital nomad, right? You're nomadic, you're hopping around from country to country, but then you can spend a little bit longer in each destination and have a little bit more flexibility, and then choose a destination. Then you can move there. And some people choose a destination in a couple months. Some people, it takes a couple years of being a country tester. It's completely up to you. But that way, when you choose your destination, then you can go back home, get all of your stuff, and move to that country. I do think if you were trying to choose between that many destinations, being a bit nomadic, country hopping for a couple months or more might actually be a better fit than doing like an epic 2 month scouting trip. But you know what? If you are doing it solo and you can work while going, might as well. Like, if you really want to, might as well. The thing that made it really hard for us was that we had a 1.5-year-old during this time. So managing the scouting and my daughter and trying to work at the same time and nap time, it was just kind of a lot. So in retrospect, I'm like, I'm still glad that I did it, but holy crap, I'm never ever doing that again. That was very intense. I was kept saying to Chris on this trip, I'm like, when on a scouting trip, you can do these following things. Okay, you can actually scout the destination. You can enjoy it like a tourist and travel around and see the sights, and you can work, and you can have a toddler. Each day you need to pick two. So for us, have a toddler was already taken every day. And so we could only choose between work, actually like see the destination to scout, and like enjoy it, well, and enjoy it and travel. That those like we couldn't actually pick two from those lists because have a toddler took one of those spots. But it is true, right? Like, you have to kind of pick and choose how you're spending your time, and having a toddler is kind of a lot for anyone who has kids, you know. So, yeah. Do I recommend going on this long of an epic scouting trip? If you have a toddler, probably not. But I did carve out time to work in each destination, which is why we spent a solid week in each place that we went. If you are not working, you could spend something like 3 or 4 days, but I do think a week is nice to really get the feeling of what it's like to live there, right? Like, really get the sense of a place. At least 5 days. If you're not working, I would try to spend at least that amount of time. So I won't bore you with how we actually planned the route. Fun fact, I made Chris do it. But we did we did plan a route that made sense, where we started in Greece and then we went to Sicily in Italy, and then we went on to Spain. And as we were planning this out, of course I had a hypothesis of where we would end up moving, and I thought probably Spain. We have a lot of clients in Spain. Spain seemed to check all of the boxes in the way that Sicily and Greece didn't necessarily. But if I was open to the opportunities. I was keeping my options open. And Chris also thought that we were going to end up in Spain as well. We ended up putting Spain at the end of the trip. Now, I do think it's hard to say what I think is better, to put the destination that you think you're going to end up moving to at the beginning of your trip or at the end, because I think either way this could create some anxiety. Because I'll tell you, when we first got to Thessaloniki, I really liked Thessaloniki, but I really liked Thessaloniki for Chris and I pre-kids. Like, when we got there, Thessaloniki is very affordable, and it's like a really awesome location. It doesn't necessarily have the beach right there that we were wanting. The water's right there, but it's not necessarily a beach. It's a bit cooler of a climate, because it's in northern Greece. The food is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And even though things close on Sundays, coffee shops don't, because Greeks love their coffee. Honestly, fun fact, Greece has the best coffee of all three. Greece's coffee is better than Italy. Come at me, Italians, but it's true. So Greece just has incredible food, like, and it was very affordable. Like, the food was just fantastic. And so we were looking around and we were like, this is a really cool city. It's very affordable, but it just doesn't make sense for us as a family. And we, from the beginning, it probably didn't help that it poured down rain the entire time we were in Thessaloniki. And I really did not pack correctly. I thought it was going to be much warmer than it was. And so I packed light, and I just didn't, I think I only had like 3 pairs of socks, and I would wash them and they wouldn't get dry in time, for me to wear them. So I was having to wear like waterproof sandals in the pouring down rain because I didn't have dry clothes, because obviously no place has dryers, but if it's pouring down rain, things take multiple days to dry, and it was just, that part was a little bit of a nightmare at the beginning of the trip. The weather was rough. And so we were just looking around and really trying to assess, does this city make sense for a family with a toddler? And we kept looking at each other and we were like, if this were a couple of years ago, like if this were 2020 us, and we just gotten married and we wanted to live in an affordable, fun city where we could go out and stay out late and live in kind of like a gritty vibes like city, this would be perfect for us, like absolutely perfect for us. But in our stage in life, it just wasn't. And so I tried my best to make it work, because I don't know why I felt anxiety. Thessaloniki was the first destination, but because it wasn't an immediately, like it wasn't an immediate, ooh, I could live here, it gave me a bit of anxiety. Just like when I did my scouting trip in Mexico and I went to Playa del Carmen first, and I did not vibe with Playa del Carmen, it gave me anxiety because the first destination I went to didn't feel like a good fit, even though I had 7 more. But anyway, we got to Thessaloniki, and it just didn't seem like it was right for us with a toddler. So I ended up posting in an expat Facebook group. And that's one thing I love about Greece, is everybody is so freaking nice. Like the locals are nice, the people who move there are nice, everybody is nice. And so when I was asking, hey, what's it like here with a toddler? I'm not seeing a lot of parks or playgrounds. What's the schooling situation? And pretty much everyone, expats and locals, immigrants, were all saying nobody with kids actually lives in the city center. Even a lot of Greeks with kids don't live in the city center. All the good schools, all of the playgrounds, all of the activities, all of the meetups, they all happen in the suburbs. And so we went out to the suburbs one day, because this is what you do on a scouting trip. You don't do all the touristy things. You experience what it's actually like to live there. And so we went out to the suburbs one day, and I was looking around and I was like, no. Immediately, Chris and I were like, no, we don't live here. Like, there's just not, the vibes are not vibing. Like, this is not what we want. And so we could pretty much safely cross Thessaloniki off of our list just because of all of that. Like, just the logistics didn't make sense for us. And I still will push Thessaloniki on people I think that it's right for, not push, but like highly recommend it. But just for us in this stage in our life, it was not the right fit for us with a toddler. I was like, I'm not ready to be a mom in the suburbs, okay? Like, I want to be able to have play dates with other moms with kids, but also like be in the city, in and amongst it, walk around. I don't want to have a car. Like, I'm not ready to be the mid-30s mom who lives in the suburbs yet. That's just not the life that I want for myself. And so we basically crossed it off the list like that. And so this is what we did in each destination. We were really seeing what's it like to live there. So we were not just eating at the fanciest restaurants. We were going to restaurants. We decided pretty quickly in our second destination that we needed to have a bit more of a budget. So we gave ourselves like one nice meal out in each destination to a place that we would say, would be date night vibes. But then the rest of the meals we were eating were places that we would feasibly go to if we lived there, just like on a random night if we wanted to eat out. We were staying in apartments with kitchens, so we might actually cook one night. We mostly just used it to cook breakfasts, I'm just going to be honest, or like heat up leftovers. But we were, eating where the locals eat, or where we would probably eat, a quick meal out if we lived there. We were going to a coffee shop. A few of the touristy things that I liked doing were go on a food tour, so we could actually get a feel for the local cuisine. I love food tours for learning more about a destination. We would go check out the beach because, of course, that's something that we would want to do if we lived there. My plan was to scuba dive in each of the three countries. That didn't end up happening because scuba diving is a bit more of a thing in Europe than it is in Asia. All my scuba diving experience is mostly in Asia, where you can kind of just a few days before be like, what you got going on? And all the dive shops are like right in town. Whereas in Europe, they're all further out. It's all very complicated. It takes, and the Uber rides or the public transport was going to take me like an hour. And I'm like, okay, this is way more of a thing than going diving in Asia. But anyway, my plan was to dive in each of the locations because I love scuba diving. So basically, you want to pick the types of things that you would do in an average week there or an average weekend there and experience them while you're scouting. Now, I've had people ask me, should I go look at apartments? And I'm like, I have never done that on scouting trips. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, you could look at what apartments are available, but you can also kind of see that online through sites like Idealista and stuff like that. So I personally wasn't going to look at apartments on my scouting trip. I was more taking my daughter to the park and seeing what that was like. I talked to anybody who will talk to me, people who had moved there from other countries, but also locals. Do you like living here? If you went to a cafe and this person had moved there from another country, you could say, why did you decide to move here? I was getting my nails done at a place in Malaga that I still go to get my nails done at. And I asked her, she'd moved from Bulgaria, and I was like, why here? And so she was talking about what she likes about Malaga and the weather and how friendly people are. And so it gives you a really good idea of what it's actually like to live there. So Thessaloniki was the first one off the list. And I do remember feeling some anxiety around what if we do this whole 2-month long scouting trip and I don't find the right place? Which is a bizarre thing to have a fear about when you're in place one and you still have 7 more places left to go. But I think you will feel that anxiety no matter what until you find a place that you like. But what our plan to do was if we went to a place where we didn't think it was going to be the right fit for us, we would just turn it from a scouting trip into a vacation, into travel. And we would just do the touristy things and just enjoy being in the location rather than trying to force it. Now, unfortunately, that didn't really happen. That was easier said than done because I think until we found the right place, we were always going to hardcore scout just to give it its full chance because we were stressed that we hadn't found a place that we really liked yet. But thankfully, the second place that we went to, Hania in Crete, we did really like. And we'd actually been to Hania before. Hania is like complete future self vibes. It is gorgeous. We absolutely love it. The problem with Hania is that the practicalities of Crete are just not the best. Like, for example, Hania is quite far from the airport. If I want to take Ava to the good school, like, I need a car. There's no other way to get her to the school I was looking at other than having a car. So, I'm like, okay, but I mean, it's so beautiful. Like, I could have a car here and we could literally, it could be a cheap one. We could literally just use it to take Ava to school and we could drive around Crete and go to hidden beaches. So I was just imagining my like beautiful, wonderful, carefree life in Crete until like when we were hardcore scouting in Crete, all of the different neighborhoods, because we were just worried about the practical logistics. And it was one of those things in the podcast episode about Greece. We did this thing where we were comparing locations to love interests, and I said Crete reminds me of this wonderful romantic vacation romance where you meet the love of your life. But when you look at how your lives actually line up, like the practical realities of your life and his life, and you look at it and you're like, ooh, would us actually trying to make this work ruin it? Right? Like, is this the type of romance that's supposed to stay on vacation and not follow you into your real life? And would us trying to make this a thing actually ruin the location for us? And so that was really our biggest concern. And it was just these, as much as I still look at those photos and videos from Crete and go, "Oh my god, I still like kind of there's a little piece of me that still wants to live there." But for a couple days towards the end of our week there, it poured down rain. And I was looking at the crappy weather and I'm like, still it's the beginning of April. It was either beginning of April or end of March, and there were things that still weren't open. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but this is more of the touristy area. Like, yeah, it's fine, but then it's pouring down rain. Things aren't that open, and the airport is really far away and like quite expensive to get to via taxi. It's like a complete ripoff. And I'm like, when we're here in the winter and it's freezing and pouring down rain and there's nowhere to go and not much to do, are we going to hate living here? And it's a pain in the butt to get off this island any time of the year except summer. And we were asking, and we are like, do people leave? Do they, like, is there still stuff happening? And the people, who led the like food and wine tour that we went on, who'd moved from other countries, and the business owners that we talked to who'd moved from other countries said, yeah, there's a group of us who stay here. Like, there's still things happening, but it's there's in when it's raining, there's not much to do because it's a very like outdoorsy island, and then you're kind of there's not much to do. I'm like, okay. So we are just looking at the practical realities of what life in Crete looks like. And so that is one thing that I highly suggest paying attention to on a scouting trip is not just, do I love this destination? How does it make me feel? Are the vibes vibing, as Chris and I said in these episodes? Because yes, they were. I was like, every day, if I could walk out and this was my neighborhood or this was my beach, I would love it. But the problem is, do the practical realities also make sense for your life? Like, am I gonna be able to give my daughter the same opportunities in Crete as I would in Spain? Probably not. She would grow up Mamma Mia vibes. Like, that's kind of basically what, like, it would be a really cool childhood, but are the opportunities there for her? Not so much. Is it easy for people to visit me? No, right? So it's one of those things where I still love it. Like, Hania still tugs at my heartstrings, but it just didn't make sense for us to actually live there long term. So it's still a hard one for me, but you know what? It is what it is. It's in my top 3 for a reason still. But then we moved on to Sicily, and I can tell you right now, all 3 locations in Sicily, I knew pretty much immediately Sicily was not going to be right for us, which is crazy because before I thought that we could move to Spain, I thought Palermo would be where we were going to move. And I always thought, I was like, I could do Italy. Like, I could live in Italy. I'm one of those people. But I just think, and I want to separate Sicily from the rest of Italy because Sicily is its own animal, right? But we thought that Sicily would be the best bet for us because it does have cities with amenities and things going on, but it also has that kind of Mediterranean vibe, the weather that we liked, the beach. We even rewatched White Lotus season 2 to get excited for it because we were actually going to be going to all the destinations pretty much that they go to in that show. But we got to Catania and immediately I was like, oh, this is not it. And we tried for a solid day, but it was not right. And I just had this feeling really the entire time we were in Sicily, but especially in Catania, where I just had this feeling like I couldn't relax, like I needed to stay vigilant. I was worried about getting pickpocketed. At night, I just didn't always feel super safe. Plus, there's a lot of like trash in the streets and things like that. And I just didn't feel safe raising Ava there. And I think I would have quite enjoyed Sicily as a tourist. And I know a lot of people enjoy traveling through Sicily, but I just had this sense the entire time. It's like that women's intuition, where you if something's a bit off. And I just had this sense the pretty much the entire time we were in Sicily, except when we went to Taormina for a little vacation for a couple days for my birthday. I just had this sense that I had to stay vigilant and it wasn't necessarily safe. And so we were in Catania, and I remember walking around Catania being like, it's fine. If I got a job here where I had to live here, I could live here. It'd be fine. I would move here for a job, but I am not going to choose to live here. And we knew that so solidly about Catania from the beginning. We actually decided to ditch Catania and go to Siracusa because we were obviously sharing this online, like our journey. And most people were saying, oh my God, why are you going to Taormina? Like, you need to go to Siracusa instead. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And everyone was talking about how much they loved it. And then we pulled up ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was like, oh, yes, based on your feedback about Hanya, I think that Siracusa could actually be in your top 3. And we're like, wait, what? Why didn't you recommend it before? And ChatGPT is like, oh, I didn't realize how important these 4 things were to you. So here, you need to go right now. And I just thought, you know what? We're already here. I'm going to regret it. And I'm always going to wonder what if we don't check it out. So we actually abandoned our hotel early in Catania and went and took the train to Siracusa just to check it out. And I will say it was better for us than Catania. But the whole time I was there, I just kept thinking, I like Hanya more. Even though on paper Siracusa was better, like, it was better in terms of it had more amenities, it had a better airport, like Catania Airport's right there. It's easier to get around, there's more stuff going on, it doesn't shut down in the winter. I just was like, but it's not Hanya. And it didn't feel as safe as Hanya either. And also, Chris got pickpocketed there on the first day. So that was fun, getting his wallet stolen. And I'm like, hey, I thought we needed to be vigilant. But I just had this feeling, too, like getting a little bit off the beaten track in these places of wandering around what it's like to live there and things like that. I got this feeling no matter where we went, it was this kind of feeling that a lot of people who lived in Sicily didn't have money, and it was like a hungry, stressful energy coming from many people who lived there, if that makes sense. And I'm not talking about everyone, but I am talking about, if you look at, for example, Crete, not a lot of people on Crete have a lot of money, but everyone seems very, like, everyone that I interacted with seemed very kind and generous and open and happy to have you there and happy that the kids were there. And I just didn't really get that sense at all in Sicily. And it's weird because, I mean, one-off people, like there was a cafe owner where we go and get breakfast in Palermo. She was super, super nice and was always excited to see us. But it was one-off exceptions. I just kind of felt like it was a less welcoming vibe. I felt like I needed to watch my stuff. In Catania, we ran into somebody whose car had just been stolen, and I'm like, okay, is this where I want to live? Is this where I want to raise my toddler? What toddlers are parents of toddlers are just constantly distracted. And if I have to constantly be super vigilant on my purse, my phone, my wallet, like I just was like, I'm a prime pickpocketing target with a toddler. Like I don't want to. I felt like something was off, and I didn't want to feel like that. And eventually, I did talk to an Italian friend that I had, and I explained, the feeling that I was feeling in Sicily, and she was saying, hey, what you were feeling is very real. Like she told me, and this is coming from her, this is not coming from me, okay? So I cannot verify this, but she told me, she's like, the mafia is still very live and well in Sicily. And if you have any sort of money or success, like they will come and they will take it from you. So there's this kind of fear and this undercurrent of violence that still exists in Sicily, like even now. They like to tell you that the mafia is long gone. They're not, and there is this kind of violent undercurrent in that island. And she said, I think you are very intuitive and you were feeling that the entire time you were there. And I will say, like, that's kind of the energy. It was just an energy that I was feeling no matter where I went. And I'm not a super woo-woo person, but I do pay attention to my intuition and how I feel, and I didn't like how I felt. So, even when we got to Palermo, I think Palermo was definitely the best fit out of all the destinations. Sicily is super affordable too, so I like really wanted to make it work. Palermo had these gorgeous like 4-bedroom apartments for super cheap, and the food's very affordable, and so I was trying to make it work. And the whole time I was there, I was just thinking, you know what? I think Spain or Hania is a better fit for us. Like I just got the sense that Sicily was not going to be the right place for us, and probably Italy is not going to be the right country for our family. And you know what? That's fine because it's a great fit for a lot of people, just not for us. So and that's what it is with every country. So obviously take what I'm saying with a grain of salt because that's my own experience. And we have many clients who are super excited to move to Italy. And so that was just the feeling that I got there. And I would not have known that from YouTube. I would not have known that from the expat Facebook groups. I had to feel it myself. So once we were done with Italy, I thought, okay, this is probably not the country for us, or at least Sicily's not for us because obviously Sicily is very different than the rest of Italy. So then we moved on to Spain. And the cool thing about Spain was that I thought, okay, Spain is probably going to be our right fit going in. We have a lot of clients who are living in Spain. So I actually already know people. So our first city in Spain was Valencia, which is actually the city that I thought if you had said, Rochelle, sight unseen, just based on your research and what you know about all the locations, tell me before you go on your scouting trip what city you're going to end up moving to. I would have said Valencia would be my top pick. And I was trying to avoid making any sort of decision or going in biased, but I really thought I was a Valencia person going into this. And so I am it's funny, apparently I'm not. I do think had we moved without a scouting trip, we would have moved to Valencia and we would have been happy. So, yes, I'm glad that we did the scouting trip, but we would have made a good decision even without the scouting trip because Valencia ended up being my second choice. So, we got to Valencia and immediately I was like, "Oh, yes. 100% yes." It had the vibes or vibing feelings from Hania. It's not as beautiful as Crete, but the amenities were there. Our very first night there, we went and got Sichuan hot pot, and I was in heaven. And just walking around, it felt very cosmopolitan, which I'm like, this is great, for raising my daughter Ava. Like, I want her to have access and be surrounded by people of different like cultures and ethnicities and races. And the parks were just beautiful. And of course, we had some current clients living there and we ran into Amy, one of our clients who was on a scouting trip there. So we got to all meet up together. And I thought, wow, if I move here, I basically already have friends. I already know people. There are so many different meetups. We were staying in a neighborhood, Rusafa, which I thought, wow, I would love to stay in this neighborhood. And there was really nothing wrong with Valencia except when we really started looking at the prices. When we started factoring in what I need to pay in taxes, which is obviously more than Georgia because Georgia's tax rate is incredible. But then also looking at rent, and then we were just kind of looking at how much food was. And I started doing the math and I was like, wow, to have the type of apartment that we want to have and the lifestyle that we want to have, like we might have to cut back a little bit while living here. And this isn't necessarily something that you all listening to this podcast need to worry about because I was coming from a very affordable country, right? So I was coming from Tbilisi, Georgia. And so, for most of you coming from the US to Valencia, Valencia will be more affordable for you. But it's not the cheapest place you can move to, right? It's sort of like if you're moving to, Amsterdam, like rent might even be a little bit more than what you're paying in Portland. But other things are lower, so you end up having a lower cost of living. It's kind of like that. I do think Valencia is a little bit more affordable than the Netherlands as a whole, but it is not a super cheap place to live. And so that was kind of the only thing tugging at us was just cost of living a little bit was just kind of in the back of my head. But otherwise, we were like, Valencia is our number one. We're probably going to move here. So then we got to Alicante, and I have no major complaints about Alicante, but the whole time that we were there, we were like, we like Valencia more. Even though certain things on paper, Alicante is cheaper, it's got the beach right there, it's gorgeous. It just felt quite touristy and then also retiree heavy for my taste. And a lot of the suggestions that we got of where to live was to, they have beautiful homes just outside Alicante city center, but you need a car. And I'm like, I don't want to have a car. So I just didn't feel. Both Chris and I were like, we like it, but we don't love it. I can't imagine ourselves living here. There just doesn't seem to be a good scene of people our age. But you know what? We have a client, Mary, who moved there, and she has friends, and she's roughly me and Chris's age. So you know what? Maybe we missed out. But I just kind of felt like it wasn't for us, and so we just went with how we felt. And at that point, there wasn't much anxiety because we already had a city that we really liked. The main thing that we were choosing between is, do we go Valencia because it makes the most sense, or do we go Hania because we also love it a lot and it's more affordable? Then we get to Malaga, and immediately, I will say it wasn't as immediate as Valencia because Malaga's a little bit grittier. So we're walking from the bus station. We took a long distance bus. We're walking from the bus station, and I'm like, okay, it's cool. It's very pretty, especially the drive-in is gorgeous with the mountains. And I was like, ooh, wow, okay. Evan from our team really liked Malaga, so I'm like, okay. And he also lives here now. But at this point, he had not chosen between Malaga and Valencia as well. But we were driving in. I'm like, okay, I can see why Evan likes this. But we're walking around an area that's actually quite close to where I live now, and it was just a little bit, it was sunset, and it was a little bit grittier, and I was like, okay, it doesn't feel as safe as Valencia. I do think Valencia, one thing I forgot to mention is it's like mecca for raising a child. Like the amount of parks, and it has like the biggest aquarium in all of Europe and amazing schools, and it just felt like it's built for kids. Like it just feels like it felt like I would be a bad parent if I didn't move to Valencia for Ava's sake. Like that's how built for kids that city is. And so as we're walking around, I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be like as good of a place for Ava. I don't know if it seems as safe, but I like it. And then, we get into our neighborhood in Soho where we're staying, and I'm like, okay, I am really liking this. And the next day, when we went out and we started exploring and we had breakfast, and I went into Centro and I met up with Evan, who had just gotten there, and we started wandering around Centro, I was like, okay, I like this. This is very pretty. Okay, this is a little bit of a different vibe. We were kind of just by the long distance bus station when we were walking through on a highway. You know what I mean? I was like, I didn't get the full view of it coming in at night. But then we walked through this beautiful park down to the waterfront, and I'm like, oh, I really like this waterfront area. And it kind of reminded me of a smaller version of like the Sydney Harbor area with the ferries and stuff, where I was like, ooh, this is nice. And I kind of got this, I had this impression that Malaga would just get flooded with British tourists and cruise ships. And it was that and like British retirees. But wandering around, I just did not get that vibe at all. And then our Freedom Life Experience coach, Alex, fun fact, she's from Spain, and her dad lives in Nerja, very close to Malaga. And she said, she's like, no, I mean, the tourists will flood, like during the high season, the tourists will flood in for a couple hours in the afternoon and then they leave. And that's living here now. Like, that's definitely the sense that I get is like, yeah, sometimes it gets a little crazy at the waterfront, like when a cruise ship comes in, but it's not bad, like not at all. And so I was walking around with Evan, and I'm like, okay, I could actually see myself living here. Like this, I can see why you like it. And, going to the beach and having a little beach day, I'm like, the beach here, like the sand is not as nice as some of the other beaches that we went to, but it's pretty and it's full of locals. And I like that. Like, I like that the locals are coming to hang out at the beach. I like the view of the water with the mountains. Like, this is my future self visualization vibes. Like, I was standing at the beach and looking at the mountains in the distance, and I'm like, okay, I really like that the beach is just right there. And I really like that Malaga is a bit more affordable. And I also really like that people in Malaga seem to be happy that we're there, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't get any sort of feeling of annoyance at us for being like tourists. People were super, super nice to Ava. I would say the nicest places that we went for Ava, Greece and Malaga, for sure. Like both locations in Greece, people were falling all over themselves for Ava, and then Malaga. I would say in Valencia, she was just a number of a million toddlers, and people were just like, okay, yeah, come in. Like they were happy that she was there. It was fine. But I would say in Valencia, people weren't as, I guess, like nice to us, like really friendly and welcoming. But Ana Lucia is known for being very nice. And like being friendly and welcoming. And I will say the entire time that we were here, I just felt like all of the locals that we interacted with were super happy to have us, very friendly, very opening, very open, very welcoming. And yeah, the amount of attention that Ava got, I just loved it. You know, like for me, I like that, especially us living in Georgia is the same. Like they love kids, and so having that kind of friendly, welcoming atmosphere, it just felt really good. And so while we were here in Malaga, because this was our last stop on our scouting trip, Chris and I had brunch for Mother's Day because it was May at this point. We over brunch, we were talking about, and a fun fact: the place that we went to brunch to, I've been to that restaurant a bunch of times now. Our women's entrepreneur meetups are there actually, and so we were having Mother's Day brunch, and we were saying, one of the activities or the friend meetups that we did in Tbilisi was brunch club, where once a month we'd pick a new brunch spot and we would go and have brunch. And we were talking to each other and we were like, how cool would it be to have a brunch club here? And like we could even start one. And this could be one of the spots that we'd have brunch at. And we were just imagining ourselves living there and already having friends. And the fact that Malaga is a bit smaller than Valencia made it feel really easy. And we could just really picture our lives there. And sure, on paper, Malaga is not quote unquote as amazing for kids as Valencia is with their fantastic Gulliver Park and they're just wonderful parks everywhere and their aquariums and all of that. But it just felt like a really good place to raise her. And it sometimes it's not necessarily about amenities, it's about a welcoming atmosphere and the ability for us to just walk to the beach when the weather's nice. Like it just felt like a good place for us to enjoy as a family. And so the fun thing is that Evan from our team was also doing his own scouting trip at the time, and we met up with him on the last day, actually that day, Mother's Day. And so we were like, hey, we decided where we're going to move, and he said me too. And so then we shouted out, we're like, okay, let's do it on three. 1, 2, 3. And we all shouted Malaga. So we all decided to move here pretty much the same time. So that's how we ended up making our decision. And people said to me, hey, you actually made your decision on the scouting trip. Like that was fast. And for us, it wasn't fast because we'd experienced all the destinations. So that by the time we got to the last destination, we were just basically choosing between Valencia, Malaga, and Hania. Like those were our top three. And so over brunch, we just talked it out. And we had been talking about the destinations the entire scouting trip. So we already knew where everything ranked. We already knew our feelings about the destinations. And so when we got to the final destination, we just needed to experience it. And then we could tell, okay, pretty much on day one, I'm like, okay, this is a competitor with Valencia. Like, I think these are our top two. And so it really felt like Malaga was kind of the happy medium between Valencia and Hania because, it's a little bit more affordable like Greece. The beach is right there. There's hiking. It seems a little bit more outdoorsy, but it still has the amenities of Valencia and an even better airport actually than Valencia. And so we were it just kind of seemed like the happy medium between the two of them. And so we could just make our decision over brunch. And really when you're actually in the place, you can make those decisions much easier. You don't need to drag it out. And I actually see a lot of people doing this, a lot of my clients dragging this decision out even after the scouting trip. And I'm like, no, you should make the decision on the scouting trip. Like, you should just make a decision at this point. Like, there's no sense dragging it out just to drag it out. Once you see it on the scouting trip and you know the visa works, you should check the visa before you go, but you know the visa works, you can make your decision on the scouting trip. And this is actually something where I wanted to make this easier on all of you. So actually, our team has put together, God, so this is actually something where our team has, oh God. So this is actually something where we wanted to make making this decision even easier on you. So the team and I have put together a special resource for you to take with you on your scouting trip to actually document your experience and help you make a decision during your scouting trip so you can actually pick your destination. So, this special resource we've compiled is free just for you. So, if you head down to the show notes and you put in your email, we'll actually send it to you so you can take it with you on your scouting trip to help you make a final decision. Because I know sometimes having something to work through, either to answer questions or rate or rank things, will help you kind of get over that indecision paralysis. Because the whole point of a scouting trip is to help you make a decision, right? It's to compare and contrast destinations. And so I want this resource for you to help make things so much easier so that you leave your scouting trip with an actual decision. This should not be drawn out, right? We're going on a scouting trip to decide what country you're moving to. Like, that's the point of a scouting trip. And so for us, I even realized too that when you visit the right place, you don't need to go see a million neighborhoods or destinations. Like, you don't need to do some hardcore scouting. Like, once we got to Malaga, I mean, we were exploring it and we were enjoying it, but I didn't feel like I needed to scout the way that I did in certain other destinations. In Hania, the vibes were vibing, but I was so worried about the practicalities of us living there. I really felt like I needed to take advantage of each day. Whereas in Valencia and Malaga, I'm like, okay, the practicalities are here and I like it, and I can tell that just from stepping foot in the city. But so let's explore it, but it just felt more relaxed. It felt like we could enjoy ourselves and our time there. And so that's something I want you to pay attention to as well, is sometimes the right city will mean that you don't actually need to scout that much. Like, just being there is you scouting it. And so I hope you enjoy this special gift from us to you so that you can take it on your scouting trip and help you narrow down your destinations to eventually pick the final one. So, like I said, just head to the show notes, click the link, pop in your email, and we'll send it to you. So, now I want to talk a little bit about, in hindsight, what we did well and what I wish we would have done differently. I talked a little bit about how crazy how crazy long our scouting trip was and how many countries that we had and things like that. But I want to talk a little bit about, what we did right, what we did wrong, what I might suggest for you. So the first thing I want to touch on is the fact that we saved Spain till the end, and whether we should have put that at the beginning to take the pressure off. Now, there is a part of me that does wish that we went to Spain first, just so that we could kind of have that pressure gone of, oh my God, are we going to find a place that we like? Because save if you know that you're probably going to move to a certain location, but you put it at the very end of your trip, you're constantly comparing every destination that you visit with this future idealized destination that you haven't gone to yet. So that is a downside of putting it at the end of your trip. Granted, at the same time, if you put the destination that you think you're going to move to at the very beginning of your trip and then you don't like it, that causes a ton of anxiety. And that's actually what happened to us in our Mexico scouting trip. So, our Mexico scouting trip, we only did 3 cities. It was we did Playa del Carmen, Mexico City, and then Puerto Vallarta. And so I thought, based on everything that I read and based on whatever people had said, I thought that Playa del Carmen was going to be our top contender. But then we got to Playa del Carmen and I did not like it. I'm not a fan. And that was pretty anxiety inducing because I was pretty set on us moving to Mexico. And then we get to the first destination and I didn't even like it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this was supposed to be our top destination. And here I am and I don't like it. Then we went to Mexico City, which I thought would be last on the list because it's not near a beach. And I get there and immediately I'm like, I love this. So I think I'm glad I at least had Mexico City second, right? But it is one of those things where it's hard to win with ordering the cities. So at a certain point, you've got to just go with what makes the most practical and logical sense with like you flying in and out and your route and the airports, and just know that either way it can cause anxiety, right? Like you're not going to not have anxiety until you go to a place that you really like. And so for us, thankfully we had Hania second. And so I think if we hadn't gone to Hania, if we didn't like Hania, and then we also were not vibing with all of Sicily, I think I would have been very anxious. So I would say try to have a city that you think you'll like towards the beginning of your scouting trip. But just know that, you've still got your whole scouting trip there. You know what I mean? So there is no correct order. There can be anxiety either way. But so yeah, just go with the order that makes the most sense for you. And I do think I have talked to some people who've gone on scouting trips and have not fallen in love with the destination and have not been to a destination where they're like, oh my God, yes, I could live here. And that can also create some anxiety as well. But I would say Evan gave me this advice when we were on our scouting trip. I was actually in Destination 1, Thessaloniki, and I was a little bit worried about this, where I'm like, what if the place that we're supposed to move to isn't even on our scouting trip? Like, what if I go to all these 8 destinations and I don't vibe with any of them? And he said to me, he's like, the most important thing is choosing your country, not choosing the exact location, because it is so easy to move to a new destination once you're already in that country. Once you have the visa, you can move anywhere super easily. And I love this advice. And it's something that I continue to say to people, because what if you have never even heard of the city that's going to be right for you yet? But you get to, let's say, Spain, and you're like, okay, I'm going to use myself as an example. 2 of our 3 top destinations were in Spain. And Spain made the most practical and logistical sense for us as well. But let's say that we felt like Valencia and Malaga weren't just quite there. They weren't 100% right. I still felt like something was off. I would say, if I was my own client, I would say move to Spain and spend your whole first year living in Spain by taking little weekend trips out to other cities in Spain. Right? Like you don't need to go back and do a second scouting trip to Spain. I mean, you can if you have the miles and you really want to, you can. But at a certain point, we've got to just make the commitment, make a decision. And so then I suggest, okay, let's move to Spain, settle in, pick whatever is your favorite, Valencia or Malaga. Okay, you said Malaga. Cool. Let's go to Malaga. And then let's start looking at other cities and towns. You haven't even explored Nerja yet. You haven't explored the north of Spain. Okay, you definitely want Mediterranean vibes on the beach. Well, what about Cadiz? Like, there are other options. There are other cities that you haven't experienced yet. And we've seen this with our own clients. Like, we had Heather, who's come on the podcast, and Heather actually moved to Valencia first, realized city life wasn't for her, and her family moved up the coast to between Valencia and Barcelona to a smaller beach town that's where the Spanish go on vacation. Like they live 10 minutes drive from the beach in this tiny town where they're the only ones who speak English and they love it. And that's for them. For me, I'm like, that's a little bit small. But they bought a house for 30,000 euros there, fully furnished, 4 bedrooms. So they love the affordable quality of life. They love that it's small. They don't mind having a car. And they love the community. I'm like, okay, that's perfect for you guys, right? But they wouldn't have known that. They wouldn't have never even known to scout that town. So they moved to Valencia knowing that they liked Spain, knowing they wanted to be in Spain. And then when they realized Valencia wasn't it, they signed a short term lease anyway. And they took some time and traveled around to find a place that better fit them. So you can always do that. So it's not necessarily about finding the perfect city or the perfect town. Oh my God, my voice. I'm still getting over this cold. It's not about finding the perfect city or the perfect town. It's about finding the right country fit. And then you can always change cities once you're there. So that's the first piece of advice that I have, and something that was really helpful for me. Another thing that I think we did really well, that I might recommend for some of you, is when we realized that Catania was not a good fit, and that there was another city very close by that was a good fit, we left. And sure, it was like a little bit of a waste of money in terms of losing 2 nights in our apartment and paying, like paying for 2 nights in Siracusa. In the grand scheme of life, it's a very small amount of money to miss out on, and have that, how do I say that, like have that itch scratched, like have that, you never have to wonder what if, like, now, or we know now, that Siracusa is not the right fit for us. But had we not gone there, I might have always been wondering about it. And then when you add in a flight back to Italy, like that really adds up. So at a certain point, if you do find other information through talking to people that another destination is going to be a better fit for you, it can actually make sense to cut your losses and adjust your trip and go somewhere else, even if it means missing out on a little bit of money in terms of your apartment rental booking, right? And so I am actually really glad that we did that, although not that glad because Chris did get his wallet stolen there. But you know what I mean? Like now I know. And so I do think that if a destination is not the right fit for you, either moving on to another one that you think might be and like adjusting your scouting trip, that can be a really good option. Or just do what our plan was and just enjoy it like it's a vacation, right? Go to the touristy places. Like, you don't need to keep scouting if you know that the destination is not the right fit for you long term, especially if you've already found another place that you like more. At a certain point, it's like, okay, I've given this a good college try for 2 days, and I still have 3 more days here, and I'm not going to move here because I like this other destination more. I'm just going to have fun. I'm just going to have fun. Now, another suggestion that I do really suggest for all of you is to go on a food tour or do the activities that you would want to do if you actually lived there. Okay. Like, we took our daughter to the park. Food tours I really like because it shows you a lot of different restaurants that you would feasibly go to if you lived there, and then you can mark them in Google Maps. And we were just asking questions to everybody. Like, this is really good advice. So talk to people, go on food tours, explore the area, and do the things that you'd normally do if you lived there. So that's something that we really did right. But I think finally, a thing that we did wrong was, just putting so much pressure on it. Like, the amount of anxiety and the worry that we had, I really wish that I could go back in time and just tell myself, like, calm down. You know what I mean? Like, Spain's at the end. It's not a big deal. Like, why are you so stressed that the very first destination is not perfect? Like, just have fun with it. Okay. Like, this is not, it feels so stressful in the moment where you're like, oh my God, I got to figure it out. I got to pick the right destination. At a certain point, it's like, just have fun with it. It doesn't have to be so stressful. And in the right location, you don't need to see each and every neighborhood, right? You don't need to have this perfect itinerary that's super stressful. Like, you're just trying to see if living there works. Now, I do suggest going out to some of the neighborhoods that you might feasibly live in, and or booking a place in the neighborhoods where you would feasibly live yourself. This is where doing a little bit of research on Facebook groups, on YouTube, and AI was helpful for figuring out what kinds of neighborhoods we might live in, and going out and seeing them. I do think that that's helpful, but at a certain point, you will just know and you won't need to go see all of the neighborhoods. So, do I recommend going on a 2-month scouting trip with a toddler? Not really, but do I recommend going on a scouting trip if you have the time and the finances and the ability to do so? I do think that it's great, and I do think it's a great idea, right? Especially if you want to move to a place and settle there and not hop around. I do think that it will help you feel so much more confident moving. And I can usually tell when I'm coaching people who needs a scouting trip and who doesn't. And sometimes I'm talking with people on a hot seat, and I say, I don't think you're ever going to feel comfortable moving unless you go and you see this place in person. Some of you probably listening to this know if you need one or not, right? If you're doing a first not forever, you can just go. You can you could just move and then always hop around later. But if you are trying to uproot, a family, or if you're trying to ship your stuff internationally, or you're bringing multiple animals, or you are older and you just want to be really settled, I do think a scouting trip, or if you don't have a ton of travel experience too, a scouting trip can be really, really beneficial to help you feel good before you move there. And I can tell you for a fact, this is the first time that I've moved to a country having done a scouting trip. And I felt way less nervous committing to Spain longer term, doing this visa, investing in an immigration lawyer, going through all the steps and making the move happen. I felt really good about it because we'd done that scouting trip. And I think I would have had more anxiety around the move to Malaga if I hadn't been there, if I hadn't experienced it. But for me, because I had been to that location, I felt like I was just coming back to a place I really enjoyed. And so that actually did make the move way less stressful, way less anxiety driven, because I knew what I was getting myself into. It was the same thing when Chris and I moved to Vietnam back when we were digital nomads. So we did like 2 6-month stints in Hoi An, Vietnam. I had actually been to Hoi An in a little Vietnam vacation that I'd done a few years earlier with some of my friends. And so that to me was great because I'd already been there. So moving to Hoi An, I was like, oh, I love Hoi An. Like I already felt really good about the move. I wasn't nervous because I'd been there before. And so that is something to be said for when you are moving to a new destination. If you want to reduce those nerves a little bit, actually going on a scouting trip or traveling to the destination that you're moving, it does make you feel a lot better about the entire process. So hopefully you enjoyed this lengthy, in-depth, I have no idea how long we've been going, lengthy, in-depth, kind of behind the scenes look at our scouting trip. If you have any questions about the scouting trip, let us know. You can always email us at support@moveabroadcoach, or ideally send us a DM on Instagram. And I'm actually compiling all of the questions that you guys send me, either for future episodes, or I'm going to do more kind of talking head content on Instagram where I just answer your guys' questions and reels and things like that. So if you ever have any questions, let us know. I want to know if is there anything about a scouting trip that you wish that you knew that's not answered here. Let me know, and definitely be sure to grab your scouting trip guide so it can help you narrow down what destination on your scouting trip is right for you. All right, that's everything for me today, and I'll see you next week. Bye.